in the audience today, and I'm so grateful for the visitors that are here with us today. Always look forward to seeing you and sharing this time together. I want to preach part 2 in our Truth or Treat series, and this has to do with, really has to do with talking to the dead, but I think that so much of it is the idea of, when people start thinking about Halloween, there's a lot of people that think a lot of different things about it, and there's so much wrapped up in it. There's so many different concepts to it. When I was a kid, we had Halloween carnivals, and we used to go trick-or-treating, and then there was a time where we didn't go trick-or-treating anymore because they were starting to put bad things in the candy. They would poison it, or they tried to put harmful things like sharp objects, glass, and razor blades in the candy. And so, there were places that would even x-ray the candy for you for, a donation or maybe for free as a service to the community. And we kind of think, what's the world coming to? Why is it becoming like this? And of course, in the 80s, there was the rise of the devil worship and all that. And there are some people that got to thinking that, Halloween was Satan's birthday. And of course, October 31st in the papal calendar was the day, it was All Saints' Day. All Hallows' Eve is the root of all of that, and it was a celebration of the dead. Well, that kind of gets to some other things that are out there. Well, there are some folks that are very sensitive to topics like this, and they would not toy with even magic. They had shows like I Dream of Jeannie that was, everybody realizes a genie is a made-up concept. It's just entertainment, and the idea that somebody could shape-shift down to something so small that get into a bottle like that, and or even a lamp. That's just make-believe. That we all realize that's make-believe, and kids kind of have fun with that, and so we play around like that. Bewitched. I love this show. It still comes on television. I enjoy watching this, and to think that somebody would believe, in reality, that somebody could twitch their nose and something would happen, disappear, be someplace else, make something appear, clean up the house. We all wish it were true, right? Yeah. So, we can pretend all we want to. We realize that it's not reality. It's just make-believe. And, of course, there's our beloved Harry Potter series. When this thing came out, there's all different kind of positions on this thing. There's like, okay, it's make-believe, and then there's some like, well, it's based on truth, and, magic, there's something to that, and, spells, incantations, and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, some of the more conservative religionists out there think this is the devil. This is all, not Harry Potter, but that he's dabbling in things that are of satanic in origin, and why should you dare be entertained by things that are that sinful? And so I'm telling you that there's a spectrum of acceptivity and unacceptability in all of this. And if you're one of those people that thinks it's the devil, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. I won't do it around you. I won't invite you to go see Harry Potter or read the books or anything like that. I'm not going to rub it in your face if it hurts your conscience. I'm not going to do that. I respect your conscience too much to do that. But I will say this. It is not a real power. There's no power to it. And I'll say this. We have other acceptable forms of entertainment that include powers that don't really exist, and we don't have a problem with it, like Spider-Man and Superman and the Power Rangers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you got all these supers out there, Mr. Incredible, Iceman, and all this stuff that's out there, and we know that does not exist, that it's just made up stuff, but we are entertained by that. We don't see any problem being entertained by that when it comes to the supers. We think, oh, well, that's safe. Well, friends, it's just make-believe. And we don't believe as a truth or as a religion that which is make-believe. So we understand the balance that you can have in this kind of stuff. Ever watched the movie Coco? It's based off the very real belief, not a very not that the belief is rooted in truth, but the belief exists, the Day of the Dead, the Mexican Day of the Dead. And it's the idea that you do have an afterlife, but your afterlife, you go into a place that's not quite heaven or hell, and you risk going into a state of non-existence if and when people who are alive here forget that you existed and they fail to keep your memory alive. Why, that is one of the most haunting doctrines I think I've ever heard of, and it's as real to some people who believe it as the truth of God's Word is to us. And so that is why when they have a decoration day at the cemetery, it's not to honor the dead, it's to keep their memory alive so that they won't go into a state of non-existence. There are some people that believe that. And I feel badly about that. And this is, a cute movie. All false doctrine set aside, it's a cute movie. It's very musical. It's got a heartwarming storyline to that. And the very idea of it toys with the emotions so much that it can be something that will bring a tear to your eye. You know that some people sell doctrines based on the emotion of it? And so there are times, I think, where we have to talk about these types of things, and especially with our kids, when we allow our kids to watch the things, we have to help them understand, okay, look, there are some parts of this that are simply made, it's not real. It's rooted in a tradition, but it's not biblical, and this is not what we believe, this is not what we teach, this is not the reality of the Word of God, and we need to set the record straight so that our kids don't cloud their judgment or their understanding of spiritual things with that which is made up. And I think that's important to do as we go through all of life and we help our kids to understand what's real and what's not real. All right? What we're talking about today, there are lots of things under the umbrella. You can make a cult be the umbrella, and it comes from a Greek word that means hidden, secret, or mysterious. Now, under that umbrella is magic. All right? And we're not just talking about the sleight of hand, maybe not just like I Dream of Jeannie, and we're not talking about Houdini and things like that, but we're talking about as a religion, as an acceptable form of the dark arts or the white arts, the idea that there is a power out there that is not of God that can be harnessed based upon your belief and your practice. What's really interesting is that the word witchcraft that appears in the New Testament appears as a work of the flesh, according to Galatians 5 and verse number 20. It is the Greek word pharmakia, from where we get our English word pharmacy or pharmaceutical. And it is because that witchcraft in the first century, when Paul wrote this letter to the churches of Galatia, understood that the practice involved the use of narcotics. If you have to, in fact, the idea of the use of narcotics, they would think that if you could have a kind of a hallucination or a vision, which a lot of times with narcotics you can see things that are not there and think things that are not real, and that somehow that it would open up your soul to connect to the netherworld or to the world that lies behind that nobody else has access to, and so that chemically speaking you could put yourself in touch with maybe even those that were dead. The idea of hexes, incantations, that voodoo that you do, all that good stuff. That comes under the umbrella of magic, under the umbrella of the occult. Now, again, we tend to separate all that out. We think, okay, there's lines that we don't cross. We have magic sets that we get our kids for Christmas, and we go to magic shows, and the sleight of hand kind of entertains us, and we think nothing of the Harry Potter series, and we think, oh, that's all just entertainment. We know in reality that doesn't do anything. But then when it crosses the line and people start believing in this stuff, then that's when you've got a kind of a problem, a big problem. Well, Genesis chapter 41 and verse number 8, notice that there were magicians. We're talking about the religion of magic. even as early as the nation of Egypt. In Abraham's time, that government had a group of magicians. Notice this. This is during the time that Pharaoh had a dream. Joseph was up and coming as a leader in the nation of Egypt, but he was one who was given the gift of interpretation of dreams, and Pharaoh didn't know it yet, but Pharaoh had this dream, and so he called, because his spirit was troubled, he called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret the dream to Pharaoh. And this is a big fail for them, because they would normally at least make up something or come up with something. That would be what they did for a living, was interpret dreams. There would be something that they could do to figure out what it all meant. You fast forward to another dynasty of the nation of Egypt. This was after Joseph had died and during the time of Moses. And when Moses was going in with those miracles to show God's power over the nation of Egypt and all nations, it was attempted by the magicians of Egypt to try to replicate the miracles that Moses was doing, as if to say, well, you're really not proving anything to us. We can do this. And so they had it back then. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 through 11. When you come into the land, now this is Moses speaking. It's some of the last sermons that he gave. This is the retelling of the law. Deuteronomy comes on the backside of Moses' life. And he's reminding the nation of Israel, the people that he has brought out of the land of Egypt and was out there in the wilderness with them. He says, when you come into the land, that is the promised land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. Well, what are they into? There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire. This was not just a practice. Now we're talking about child sacrifice, burnt sacrifices of children. This was popularized by the religion of Molech, the god Molech and its religion, but it wasn't the only one to do that. It was very common in the land of Canaan. And Moses is saying, do not get involved with this kind of religion. There's nothing to be gained by sacrificing your children to the god Molech. It's not going to help you in any way. But there was sort of a divination that came along with that, some sort of soothsaying, some sort of ability to predict the future or to know what you ought to do in life if you would sacrifice your children. So he says, do not let them pass through the fire. Not one who practices witchcraft or a soothsayer or one who interprets omens or a sorcerer or one who conjures spells or seeks a medium or is a spiritualist or one who calls up the dead. And that is the list of things that is associated with the occult, and it's been going on forever. It's been going on a long time. Manasseh, one of his downfalls as a king of Israel in 2 Chronicles 33 in verse number 6 is that he caused his sons to pass through the fire. What is he saying? He's saying that he offered some of his children in the valley of the son of Hinnom in a child sacrifice, a burnt sacrifice. That's what he did. And he practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft and sorcery, and consulted mediums and spiritualists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. God was not well pleased with this. Under the umbrella of the occult is not only magic, but mantics. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. This is just a smidgen of the list of what could be under the umbrella of mantics, that is astrology. You know, the people that like to try to predict or try to do their life according to the horoscope. What does my horoscope say? And this will help me make my decisions on a daily basis. Friends, that's not consulting God, that's consulting astrology. And so then there's crystalmancy, and that is, the idea of looking in the crystal ball. The Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz had a crystal ball on her table, and there's a mirror. Maybe people who look through mirrors, You know, that's why when you look at all the spook shows and all the haunted, you got to watch out for the mirror in those ghost movies, because that's when you're going to see the ghost, right? You don't see it in real life, you're going to see it in the mirror, though, right? And it's going to scare you half to death, right? So the mirrors, that comes from crystalmancy, or maybe even a still water in a pond, being able to tell things like that. Bibliomancy, you think, well, that sounds like the Bible. Yeah, that's people that think that there are secrets in the Bible that haven't been unlocked yet, and so they're going to look for those passages that you thought they meant one thing. No, they really have a secondary meaning. There are people that have written books upon books upon books, unlocking those passages for your knowledge so that you can live a better life, because God's been hiding something from you. And then there's numerology, the hidden meaning of numbers. This is not just in secular life, but there's people who do that with the Bible as well. Ooh, that number means something. And then there's palmistry, which is the reading of palms, and then there's the reading of tea leaves and the observing of omens and interpreting all those little things. Okay, so that's Mantics. There's all that stuff. But I want to talk to you about Spiritism today, because that's really what we're talking. When we talk about people who try to contact the dead, this is a big deal. This is something that people really would like to be able to do, is to talk to their dead ancestors. I know people who pray to their ancestors. There's people that do this, and we've got to talk about this because it seems to be more of the prevalent problem. Ghost hunting, when you watch those ghost hunting shows, and by the way, I'm not the only one. You've probably done it too. Have y'all ever been on a ghost tour? You ever done that? You know what it is? A big history lesson through town. As you walk through Jefferson, you're walking through a place with a past. You know what they really need to do? They need to come up with a ghost tour that includes walking through the pasture where, what's her name was killed. They have the big reenactment every year. Somebody told me her name. Diamond Bessie, that's right, the Diamond Bessie murder trials. Well, my wife and I got caught up in Diamond Bessie. We got to reading the books and different things, and I thought, they kind of have an approximate, there's two different kind of descriptive coordinates of where she was actually found dead or murdered, and it's actually somebody's private property right now. And I thought, why don't they open that up, and somebody could make a killing of just tourists right there, But, I mean, we've been to the gravesite, we've read the books, we've gone by the hotel, the little bed and breakfast where she supposedly was staying before she was murdered that day. I mean, we followed this thing all around. It was so entertaining to us. Jefferson has got a lot of history, and not all of it's very good, but we kind of find entertainment in that. And so what I'm saying is that in an entertainment aspect, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that, because it's kind of fun to think about what all took place there. But when you look at those TV shows, those TV show productions about the ghost hunters and different things, materializations are the way that ghosts, they say, manifest themselves. So you're taking pictures and you see the orb, the all too popular orb. Well, that's a ghost. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, there's a really... whenever there's a ghost in your house, you can't see it, but you walk through where it is, and you suddenly feel what? Cold, and there's the little goosebumples on the back of your neck. Well, that's one, and so they say things like that. Well, friends, those are what they are defining as materializations. And then apports is the word that they talk about, the transference of an object through walls, or things that are in some other place that magically appear. That the spirit world is taking someplace. Sometimes things go missing, and in the ghost shows they say it's the ghost that did it. Well, that's apports. And then there's the spirit writing, and that's when somebody is doing a seance, and they're sitting there doing this free association writing or whatever, and it's not them that's writing, it's the ghost that's writing through this person. Of course, it's all a show. What I'm saying is that there are... In Spiritism, this is sort of a belief system, and this is how the ghosts are sort of manifesting themselves according to their teaching. Sorcery, Ouija boards, necromancy. Necromancy is actually just talking to the dead. And I think that's where we'll land today, because we could talk about so much. But look at ancient Spiritism, and it is called the mother of the occult. And there is, we understand that Manasseh was involved in that. 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 6 is the parallel passage, the one that we saw a moment ago, that he made his sons to pass through the fire, practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft, consulted spiritists and mediums. Those are things that the Lord does not want us to do. But a necromancer is one who seeks to communicate with the dead, and one who has, when you see in your Bible, one who has a familiar spirit, it means that they are in contact with somebody who is dead, or at least they believed that they were in contact with somebody who was dead. There's a debate over whether it actually had any merit or not. Did these people who practiced these things, God said to stay away from it because it was real? There's people who debate that. And then there's the other side of the debate that God says stay away from it because it's a false idea, there's no power in it, and you're seeking a power that's not God to direct your life. That's the real sin, is you're looking for something else. You're willing to make up a whole new religion. You're going to come up with a new idolatry to try to figure out what decisions you're going to make in life and bring peace of mind to your troubled heart. You're going to try to dabble in these things that are not God. And God says it's just another form of idolatry. That's spiritual adultery. That's what's the big fat hairy deal with it in the Bible, is that it's something else besides God. Leviticus chapter 20 and verse number 6 says, the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. By the way, that was something that we find out in Leviticus 20 and verse number 27 that was punishable by death, because it was seeking something that was not God. Leviticus 19 and verse number 31, turn you not unto them that have familiar spirits. These are things that were considered sinful in the Old Testament. I think a lot of people think, okay, I know that the belief exists, but is it real? I mean, is it an actual legitimate power that's alternative from God? And is this why people do it? Can anyone actually speak with the dead? Can anybody do that? Well, I think that there are some people who believe that's possible. And I think that some people may believe it because of an event that took place in the Bible. Remember, it is considered to be something that's not real by God. Galatians 4 and verse 8. Paul said, but then indeed when you did not know God, you served those which by nature are not gods. In other words, whenever the Bible says that you used to serve false gods and they really are not gods, that's true. Gods, there's one God, and every other kind of God that there is, it's a figment of man's imagination. It's something that man has started. They don't self-exist. They are created by man. And we give them power, and we give them their reputation. Whoever invented Molech decided what kind of character Molech would be. And they decided what the worship of Molech would be. The same with the temple of Diana in Ephesus. And on the list could go. Everybody that has a false god religion has a, if you were able to trace it back, it came up within the mind of man at some point. And so that's why Paul says, which are by nature not gods. Then you look at a passage like 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5 and 6. Now, watch what he says. For even if there are so-called gods, he's not saying that there are, he's saying if there were such thing as so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords. Yet for us there is one God, the Father of whom are all things, and we for Him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things and through whom we live. In other words, there is, by the testimony of the Apostle Paul, just one God and just one Lord, and they are the Creator, and besides that there is none. They do not exist. And so if they are existing in our culture, then they're existing in our imagination or our mind only. We keep that going. And so that's 1 Corinthians 8. Now, the word familiar spirit that you find in the Old Testament was also translated into the Greek Old Testament called the Septuagint translation. That was done down in Alexandria, Egypt. It was a legitimate translation of God's Old Testament. And whenever you see the word familiar spirit in the Septuagint translation, which again was written in Greek, you will see the word egos trimathus. Egos trimathus. And it's a word that means to prophesy from the belly. To prophesy from the belly. The source of prophecy is from the belly. I want you to stop and think about it. This is one way of saying this is all ventriloquism. This is not legitimate. This is a farce, and it is passed off as real. It's a form of entertainment. It's manufactured. It's man-made. And there's an art to it. And there has to be some legitimate parts for people to buy into it and believe in it. Because if not, people would never do it. So I'm telling you, brother, that there are some surprises in the Bible along these lines. And I turn my Bible over to first. I'd invite you to do this as well, to look at 1 Samuel 28 in your Old Testament. You're going to look at one of the last things, one of the crowning sins of King Saul. This is one of the last things that he did. He was already on a downward spiral, spiritually speaking, and this is probably one of the last things that he does on his way out. This is one of the most notable cases in the Old Testament, is that of Saul's consultation of the medium known as the Witch of Endor, whereby Samuel is said to have been summoned from the dead. Friends, if it was really Samuel that was summoned from the dead, then God allowed, for the purpose of shock value, Samuel to be able to speak through this necromancer. All right? Now let's follow the reading. Let's start in verse number 3. Now Samuel had died. That is, the prophet Samuel, the judge Samuel had died, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah, in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the spirits out of the land, or the spiritists out of the land. Then the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul gathered all of Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by the Urim or by the prophets. Now, he's just listed 3 ways in which the Lord used to communicate. Dreams, we're pretty sure we understand what that is, and we understand the prophets, but you may not understand the Urim. The Urim and the Thummim, I don't even really understand all there was about it. I understand they were like objects through which indicated what God's will was. It seems to be a popular thing in the Old Testament, up to a point. But because God was giving him the silent treatment, Saul said to his servants in verse 7, "Find me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "In fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor." So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes, and he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night and said, "Please conduct a seance for me, and bring up for me the one I shall name to you." Then the woman said to him, "Look, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life to cause me to die?" And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing." Then the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" And he said, "Bring up Samuel for me." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul." Now, 2 things happened here. She cried out with a loud voice when she saw Samuel, and then realized that she had been deceived by King Saul. Now, there are 2 things that are going on here. There is some shock value as to the fact that Samuel has made an appearance. There is some shock value in learning from him that King Saul is who is approaching her with this information. In verse number 13, the king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What did you see?" And she said, "I saw a spirit ascending out of the earth." So he said to her, "What is his form?" And she said, "An old man coming up, and he is covered with a mantle." And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed down, and Now Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul answered, "I am deeply distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me and does not answer me any more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do." See, there's the idea of talking to the dead. What should I do in life? What kind of decision should I make? And Samuel cried, or Samuel said rather, "Why? So why do you ask me, seeing that the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy? And the Lord has done for Himself as He has spoken by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, nor execute His fierce wrath upon Amalek, therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me," in the sense that you're going to die. All right? "The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." And immediately Saul fell full length on the ground and was dreadfully afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no food all that day or night. And the woman came to Saul and saw that he was severely troubled and said to him, "Look, your maidservant has obeyed your voice, and I have put my life in my hands and heeded the words which you spoke to me. Now therefore, please, heed also the voice of your maidservant, and let me set a piece of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way." I think that was a hint to please go in peace. Don't do anything to me. But he refused and said, "I will not eat." So his servants, together with the woman, urged him as he heeded their voice. And then he rose from the ground and sat on the bed. Now, I just, this is the one time, and the Bible has given this instance credibility, that necromancy worked in this situation. And I believe that God allowed it to happen, not because that she had any power to call or summon the dead, but that the only way that God was going to reinforce, He wasn't going to give him any more information than what he already had. He just didn't accept or believe the truth that God had already revealed to him. And so He allowed Samuel's, a voice from the dead, to speak the very same thing that God had already revealed to him. God was not going to use the normal ways with Samuel. If He was going to speak to him, you think about it, Samuel was going to have to sin against the Lord for him to do it. And that's an extreme thing in the Old Testament, and one in which we need to take note of. But whenever I see Saul telling the woman, "Do not be afraid," I think she was afraid for two reasons. I think she was afraid because she actually got to see a ghost. And I know she was afraid because she thought that it was a big setup on the part of Saul. Sauls Sin, he knew that he was going against his own law. That's why he disguised himself. It's why he went by night. He was a hypocrite in that sense. Hypocrite means a play actor, one who dresses themselves up as something else. But friends, this is why we see in the Bible it's such a big problem. 1 Chronicles 10 and verse number 13, Saul died for his unfaithfulness which he had committed against the Lord, because he did not keep the word of the Lord, and also because he consulted a medium for guidance. This was a sinful practice because it was not seeking God. So why is spiritualism or spiritism sinful? Well, it's paganistic. Isaiah 8 and verse number 19 says, "Seek those, when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their God?" That's the point that Isaiah was trying to get across. They were doing this in Isaiah's time, seeking a source that's not God. Another reason why spiritism is wicked is because it's a work of the flesh. Did you know that efforts to communicate with the dead under Well, that was an unusual circumstance, but under the normal circumstances, which is the way that God has set it up, the dead cannot communicate with the living. Ecclesiastes 9, 5, and 6, the king said, "For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten." Look at what it says in verse 6. "And their love, their hatred, and their envy, it's all perished. Nevermore will they have a share in anything done under the sun." Remember what Saul was told by Samuel? He said, "Tomorrow by this time, you're going to be as us. You're going to be where we are. You're going to be as we are. You're going to be dead. Why do you disturb me?" he asked. He was in a place where he was fine and comfortable, and it was a disturbance at best to seek Samuel's advice. Why do you disturb me? In Luke chapter 16, we read of the rich man and Lazarus. They both died, and Lazarus was carried by angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man died and was buried, and he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and he could see Abraham and Lazarus across the great gulf. We get these little descriptions about this place where the dead go. And this conversation took place by the rich man saying to Abraham, "Could you send Lazarus back from the dead? Could you send him back from the dead and tell my brothers not to come to this place?" And he says, if he would raise from the dead, that would be quite the miracle, and they would listen. And Abraham says, even if he rose from the dead, they will not listen. Which makes me wonder why people seek the dead's advice anyway. Saul sought the advice of Samuel. Did he listen? Did Saul make any kind of changes that would put, if he knows he was going to die the very next day, and he knew that the kingdom had been taken away from him, would you not, as a Christian, say, you know what, I have lived in sin up to this point, I'm fixing to meet my Maker, I think right now would be a pretty good time for me to get all things right with God. I think now is the time that I should put away my sin and do something about it. But no, that never enters his mind. And it doesn't enter the minds of a lot of people who seek the advice of the dead. Because whatever it is that they could get from it, it's not going to make any lasting change. It's not going to motivate them to make a step towards God whatsoever. And that's the problem with it. It doesn't motivate people to do anything different that's authorized by God. There is a little poem written by Kipling. It says, "Oh, the road to Endor is the oldest road, and the craziest road of all. Straight it runs to the witch's abode, and as it did in the days of Saul. Nothing has changed of the sorrow in store for such as go down on the road to Endor." The road to Endor. The witch of Endor becomes kind of a metaphor for us today. Because people seek information from everybody and everything else except God. We've got the most ignorant, smartest people on the face of the world today because we have access to the internet. But they won't open up the book. And I'm here to tell you, brethren, I love studying this stuff out. It really is fascinating to me. The more I learn, the more history I learn, the more about it. I mean, I just eat it up. I just think it's really interesting. I don't preach on it very much. I think there's more to preach about than this stuff, but I think, we're kind of in the mood for this right now. I mean, it's Halloween. So, what is some application we can make today? I don't know if you know anybody personally that seeks out the mediums. I've joked about that lady on the south end of town for 13 years. I probably need to go introduce myself to her, not for the purpose of gaining any information, but if I'm going to bring her up, I guess I should go introduce myself, But you know what? I know that there are equally grievous sins. We don't have to go seeking a necromancer to get our answers. We could simply just not seek God. And far too many people aren't. God says He wants us to seek after Him. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. And all these things shall be added unto you. The lesson is yours. If you need to respond today, maybe it is you're in search of what must you do to be saved. Maybe you need the answers to questions about your own salvation. I know that we'd love to study the Bible with you. That's really what we would do. We'd answer those questions with the Word of God. We'd help you to understand what you need to do to be saved. Maybe you're already maybe you're ready. You're ready to obey the gospel today. You're ready to do that. You want to put Christ on in baptism. All things are ready. We're ready to do that. If you simply need the prayers of the church, whatever need you have today, we want to help you with that. We want to help you do that by inviting you down front right now while we stand and sing.
Bring Christ your broken